When corporate executive and father Kevin Renner woke up one day dreading to head to the office, he decided to change the course of his life. Feeling like he really didn't know his kids as well as he'd like, he decided to learn about fatherhood from the vantage point of daughters. So he interviewed 50 women around the world for his book, In Search of Fatherhood, a motherlode of wisdom from the world of daughterhood. And he's with me now. Thank you so much for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Kevin, I always said there's no playbook for being a parent, for being a father, but you have one now. You've written one.
Yes.
What's the most important thing you learned?
A bit of one. Well, I interviewed women across 7 decades and 17 countries, and a very consistent set of themes came through, and that is that there are essentially 3 stories that unfold between fathers and daughters. The first is what I call the long straw, which is the daughters who get the great fathers. An example would be in the book a woman named Wendy, whose father raised her by himself while he was going through medical residency, and she proposed to him when she was 4 years old. At the opposite end of the spectrum is what I call the short straw, and that would be the kinds of stories where women are, as girls, abandoned, abused, and so forth. There's a story in the book, for example, of a woman named Courtney who pulls a gun on her father when she's 12 years old.
Oh, goodness.
And in the middle, there are what I call the long and the short of it, where there's, for example, a physical presence by the father, but a psychological disengagement. So there are a complex, competing set of forces there.
Who are these 50 women? How did you decide who made the cut? Which ones?
Well, again, the women were from around the world, 17 countries, from their 20s to their 80s. And I really went out to try to get as much diversity as I could. So I spoke with women who were, on one hand, a retired state Supreme Court justice and corporate executives, to, at the other end of the spectrum, unemployed women and homeless women.
We're going to get to a few tips, a few must-know rules for dads raising daughters. But before I ask you that, what was the biggest surprise to come out of this for you?
I think the biggest surprise was the emotional intensity. I spent hundreds of hours with these women, and it was remarkable to me how the stories really wanted to come up and out of their experience in their lives with their fathers. And virtually all of the women cried during our interviews. One of them cried for 4 hours.
I did not realize that there was such an emotional intensity there.
There
a few you call them must-know rules for dads who are raising fathers.
Yeah.
One, and we may not be able to get to all of them, but I like this one. Just hang out with them.
Yeah.
Just play catch, stuff like that.
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah. It was, you know, you can't have these conversations of this sort of depth and authenticity without learning some big lessons. And one of them was surprising, which was the small things made the big difference. And when I asked women what they really treasured looking back on their childhoods with their fathers, it was the small things, playing catch, working in the wood shop with their dad at night, those kinds of things.
yes. And that leads to another one. Everything we do as a father communicates to them.
Everything. And
Good and bad.
that's right. And I think most fathers are unaware of the depth and duration of the impact they're having by the small things they do.
Yeah. You influence who your daughter marries.
Indeed. Indeed. Story after story after story reinforced what a lot of psychology tells us, which is that we come back to these patterns that we experience in early childhood and we reenact them through some sort of drama in adulthood.
Right.
But women were able to very clearly say, you know, I've married my father, essentially, and we're working through some of the same things we did as
Every
as
father
children.
of a daughter needs to read this. You got some great tips. Kevin, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Kevin Renner. If you want to know more, you go to his website, kevinrenner.com, or for a link. If you missed anything, you can re-watch this segment at WGNTV.com/midday.